All right, Lou, thanks for joining me with Century 21 Revolution in Boston. Just reading the numbers off the website, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but over 200 million in sales in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, over 50 million real estate portfolio you manage for your investors, and over 150 five-star reviews for your team on Zillow. Does that all sound right?
Well, you're embarrassing me by reading the numbers. But yeah, that it might be a little bit more than that now, but
That's right. That's right.
we
What
have
are
to
those
try to
numbers?
quantify our successes in some way to show clients that we have experience and we know a little bit about what we're doing.
Exactly. Yep. That's your proof of concept there. So I guess maybe start from the beginning, Lou. Like how did you get into real estate and how you got your first clients?
So my story is maybe a little atypical. So I went to school in Boston and I got an English degree. And I never necessarily thought that I was going to teach, or for a while I did think I was going to write. And I did pursue it, but there's a part of me that was always really interested in business, in starting businesses and running them and growing them. As a kid in high school, I started a couple little businesses that never really went anywhere, but like gave me some good experience and taught me some good lessons. And so when I got out of school, early 20s, you've got a degree that has basically no monetary value. And you're looking around and you're like, well, what do I do now? And being in Boston Metro, there's a lot of young kids that do real estate because Boston is one of those cities that has a super robust rental market. And so I had some friends who were in real estate and they were like, hey, I think you would really like this. Why don't you, get your real estate license and give it a try? And at that time, this was like 2008. It only required 24 hours of classroom time and then to take a test to get that real estate license at that time. The state has since increased that to 40 hours of classroom time, but we always joke that like it's more challenging to become like a barber or an esthetician or a cosmetologist in Massachusetts than it is to get that real estate license. Like they've really, I don't know who is responsible for that. And frankly, when you talk to people in the industry, almost all of us believe that that bar needs to be raised, that needs to be like 100 hours of classroom time, or maybe, classroom time plus apprenticeship plus whatever. But it is what it is. So I got into real estate and I started off doing rentals. I worked at an office on Newbury Street, right in the Back Bay. And the great thing about the rental market is that clients are really easy to come by. When you're getting started, like when you're new to real estate and you're trying to jump right into sales, I imagine it must be very challenging to take on a new client. You've never done a sale before and you're trying to convince this person to allow you to guide them through this tremendous financial transaction. Whereas with the rentals, we would make ads, post them online for rental properties, and you would get 5, 10, 20 leads a day. I mean, the inboxes and the phones would just blow up with leads because it's a super transient town. I mean, with all the universities and, healthcare, tech, biotech, people are constantly coming in and out of Boston. And so tons of leads, and you go out there and you just start renting apartments. And that industry is very much like the Wild West. And I don't want to go too far into the rental side of things on this conversation, but it's a very good way to get your feet wet, to get some early quick transactions. Obviously the price points are a lot lower, so as a young kid, it's easier to feel comfortable guiding people through that stuff because there's a big difference between, doing a $2,000 rental and doing a $500,000 sale. The stakes are a lot lower. So, I did that for a little while. I got out of the business for a couple of years and did some like soul searching that you do in your 20s, trying to figure out who you are. But I ended up back in Boston and back in real estate. And I've been doing it uninterrupted since about 2012 to now. But one of the other advantages about doing the rentals is that it helps you to build a client base, that you're doing transactions with people. Once you have successfully completed a transaction, now you've built up a little bit more of that trust and you're growing with the people who are also growing. People who start off renting an apartment who are perhaps early in their careers. As they advance in their careers, they're going to look to buy their first property. The name of the game in sales is who do you know, who do you like, who do you trust. So those rentals, in year 2 and year 3 can start turning into buyer clients who are giving you a call back and saying, hey, you helped me rent an apartment. We had a great experience. Can you now help me to, do this purchase?
Great. So you mentioned leads now. Do you feel like most of your business is referrals, or how are clients finding you guys?
So that has also been a journey. And our lead generation has changed over the years. Now having been in the business for a long time, I personally, I'm not chasing after the rentals anymore. I mean, we do represent a lot of investors and we help them to list their properties for rent. But, I'm not really fielding anymore of, hey, I need to rent an apartment. Can you help me find one? Like, I'm not really taking that lead anymore. But I do encourage, when we do hire on new agents, I always encourage them, like, learn this side of the business because it'll always be there. It's very robust against market fluctuations. As rates go up and down, the rental market is always there. But going to your question, so for a lot of years, we did paying for leads. Realtor.com, Zillow, you pay them X amount of money per month, and they give you however many leads they give you. And that also can be a great way for an agent early in their career to start building up more of a client base and start creating more transactions, because once you get the hang of fielding those internet leads, it's just volume coming in, and it's very much done for you. That's one of the advantages of pursuing that kind of lead, is that you pay the money and then they're doing everything on their end to make sure that you're getting that 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 leads, however much you're paying for. Obviously it's not guaranteed because they never know how many inquiries they're going to get. But for a few years, that really helped to pad our bottom line and, increase the number of people we were doing business with. And in 2021, we had a great return on it. I think we had a 5x return on every dollar that we dumped into our Zillow campaign. But what really shifted my focus, and what I encourage our agents now to do as they continue in their careers, in 2023. So, the market started shifting in 22. Inflation started biting, the rates jumped up. Going into 22, we were still looking at like 3% mortgage rates. And by the end of 22, we were looking at, between 5 and 6% mortgage rates. And so going into 23, my Zillow campaign flatlined because buyers just started pulling back, and sellers had a real hard time adjusting to the new condition of things as the rates jumped up. Because, you think about it, it makes sense. I'm John Smith and I live at 123 Main Street, and I've got a 4-bed, 2-bath colonial, 2,000 square feet. And my next door neighbor has basically the exact same house. And he sold his house in, let's say, the end of 2021, and he got $100,000 for his house. And now I'm trying to sell basically an identical house 6 months later, but the rates are 2 points higher, and I can't get $900,000, and I maybe can't even get $850 because things are starting to pull back a little bit. And so, I may need to sell my house, but I may be frustrated and angry, and I may not do it because I don't want to take less than what my neighbor got for the same house. Why would I want to do that? So we just saw the transaction volume crunch. When you go from 2021, we had about 6 million home sales nationwide, and then 2023, you had about 4 million home sales nationwide. So there was just less business to do all around. And so that Zillow campaign, where I'm paying a set amount of money per month for leads, all of a sudden I'm getting a lot fewer leads, and the leads that I am getting are harder to convert because, we had taken advantage of this great market for so long, not realizing that the game was a little bit different once things got more challenging. And I think there are a lot of agents who got exposed over the last few years who perhaps thought that they were better at the job than it turns out they actually were, because we were all benefiting from these great market conditions of cheap money. And now, it's more incumbent on all of us to do our jobs really well. And some people are, I think, starting to see the holes in their business. And I certainly saw the holes in mine, that it was unsustainable to keep running a business where I was paying a monthly fee for the leads. So in 23, I really started retooling, kind of how I was approaching things, one thing that I started looking at more was companies that did leads based on a referral system. So rather than here's money up front, give me leads, it's you give me leads, and when I convert them, I'll give you payment on the back end. I'll give you 25, 30, 35% of the commission when we close the deal. So that reduced my risk up front of, if the leads aren't any good, I'm not out of pocket anything. And sort of, I like that model a lot better because it flips the responsibility. If I'm paying you a set amount of money every month for leads, like for you, it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not you're giving me good leads because you're going to get paid every month either way. And whether or not I can convert those leads doesn't necessarily make a difference because again, I'm shelling out that money every month. Whereas with the referrals, it's much more important that I'm getting quality leads and that I'm fielding them correctly because if they don't convert, nobody gets any money. So that was one piece of it. But the other piece that I really leaned into much more heavily, and I think is the thing that's more important for any agent that wants to build a sustainable business, is marketing to the database. Like, you alternatively hear it as sphere of influence. You hear it as your database, your client list. It's said in a lot of different ways, but basically focusing on the people rather than, hey, I got to get a whole bunch more people to reach out to me that I've never talked to before. Really focusing on past clients and people who have reached out in the past and maybe nothing came together, but their information's in your database. And I hired a marketing company to really help me focus on that through video campaigns, social media, email campaigns, direct mailing, just really pumping up that, being that person that and you like and you trust, who is delivering value on a monthly basis, who is giving you educational information and telling you about real estate opportunities and all the other things that you would want in someone that you would trust to help you with that.
Okay. And so you had mentioned how, let's say somebody was maybe interested in selling, they decide to hold off. How do you nurture leads that maybe aren't ready to buy or sell right now? Is it something through a CRM
So
that you
we
guys are
do
using?
use a CRM. And at this point, I guess I have like several different CRMs. We have CRM software that we get through Century 21 and the Anywhere Corporation. And that does a lot of stuff really well. But there's some things that I was looking for that didn't come through that software. So we also pay for our own CRM software that fills in some of those gaps and gives us a little bit more of that tracking data, the behind the scenes stuff that helps us to know, what are people looking at? How are they engaging with our content? And the marketing company that I hired, that really is part of their primary purpose. Is basically what we do is we record like 2 or 3 videos a month. And I've started doing a mixture between, there's stuff that we kind of call like evergreen content, which is, here's 3 tips to prep your home for sale, or here is some advice for a buyer going into a competitive offer situation, that kind of content that's applicable all year to most people at whatever stage they are in the buy or sell process. But I also, after a while, started mixing in more local content as well, going to, reviewing local businesses and restaurants and meeting people, within that neighborhood. And so we do this video stuff. We put it out on social every month. We send it out in email campaigns. We do postcard mailings to, just make people aware, hey, there's a new video up on this topic if you're interested in that. And that just helps that client nurture for the people who are not ready to do a real estate transaction, but maybe ready in 6 months or a year or 2 years or whenever that happens to be.
So which of the content do you think performs the best? Is it like there's certain videos where it's like listings or behind the scenes testimonials? Have you guys ever tracked that to see what works better than
So
others?
I can tell you the content that people most want to see. And it's kind of interesting how this has impacted like all forms of American life. And I don't want to get into politics, but I think what has happened in politics is the same thing that's happened in real estate. It's the same thing that's happened in a lot of different industries. And it's basically entertainment as commerce or entertainment as currency. That, we literally elected a reality show president. Like we took a person who came from reality TV and said, let's put that person in the White House. And even the way our politics function now is much more like it was being directed by someone who is getting ratings on entertainment television than, this is political discourse. Real estate is no different from that. Like, people want to be entertained. And a lot of the content that I find that does the best, there's one guy in our market who just does walkthrough videos. Most of the content that he puts out is he goes to luxury properties and, here's this $3 million property and I'm going to walk through it and look at this and look at that. He has a tremendous following and gets tons of engagement on those posts. There's another guy who a lot of his stuff is just more entertaining. He's kind of foul-mouthed. He curses a lot. He's very Boston. And that stuff plays really well. While I think that the content that educates is useful and I think that people need it, but if you don't meet that entertainment threshold at least a little bit, then people are not going to digest the content. Like, they're not. One of the biggest things that I've learned recording video for social over the last few years is that if you don't have a good hook in the beginning of your video, if that first 3 to 5 seconds is not something that's engaging, that makes people want to watch more, then they won't. They'll go to whatever the next video is. It doesn't have to be about real estate, it could be about anything. And so, for me, that's become more of my focus as I progress in making more and better videos is, how do I start a video off in an engaging way, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with the content of the rest of the video? I've done ones where we had some kittens and I'm just holding kittens up in the air in the beginning of the video, which has nothing to do with anything else about the rest of the video. I've done ones where I'm pretending to have a phone call, like starting the video and I'm not even looking at the camera and I'm pretending to be on the phone and then oh, hey, sorry about that. Let me tell you about real estate. It's, and I think that a lot of agents and particularly people that have been in the business for a long time and are watching it evolve, I think that there is a clash with the modern way of doing business because, people who got into this 30 or 40 years ago, the internet was just it was a tool that you could use that would, help you to do your business, but it wasn't all of the business was on the internet. The business was still out there. It was still working the phones and knocking on doors and building client relationships. And it is still that in part, but the digital side of things, I forget what the stat is, but it's something 90% of home buyers are looking at listings on the internet. That's where we go to gauge whether or not we trust a business person we want to work with. What do? You Google them, you look at their reviews, you see what their online presence looks like. And that's part of how you build that trust. Even if you got a direct referral, even if, a past client or a friend said, oh, you should work with this agent, I know that they're still looking us up online to see, is there that social proof somewhere on there, whether social media, website, Google, Zillow, whatever, that backs up or reinforces that this is a person who I can work with and a person that I can trust.
Got it. Yep. So as it relates to kind of to time management, are there tasks that you're doing right now that maybe take up some time that they don't generate revenue?
Yeah, there's so much. I've been a broker owner for a long time. I started a boutique brokerage in 2014. And then we transitioned to being a Century 21 at the end of 2022. And it's been a tremendous learning experience. I couldn't be happier that we made the switch and became part of this organization. But one of the things that I think about all the time, and that it's part of the growth plan for our business, and probably for most businesses, whether they're real estate or whatever else, but thinking about leverage. And not just thinking about leverage, but thinking about the daily activities that need to get done to run a business, whether it's marketing or accounting or sales or, whatever it is that keeps the business going and grows the business and generates more revenue, that you can basically put a dollar sign next to each of these activities. If I wanted to hire a bookkeeper or someone to manage, the accounting side of things, there is a dollar per hour that it would cost to hire a person to do that work. Social media work, marketing work, whatever. For everything, there is a dollar figure associated with, if I hired someone to do this, what would I have to pay them to do that work? And so as we grow and as we get busier and busier, it becomes more important to identify what is the low dollar work and what is the high dollar work, what can I farm out, and what do I need to either do personally or do in-house. And so hiring that marketing company was a big step for me because I had been used to kind of doing everything myself for a long time, and I saw that it's been holding me back. And I'm doing a lot of work on trying to think about what now can I hand off to somebody else, or, how do I create systems where these things get done but don't necessarily get done by me? Because what I realized is that, the highest and best use of my time is working with clients on real estate transactions. Like, that is the activity that produces the most money, that is the most difficult to hand off to somebody else and say, hey, work with this seller or work with this buyer. I mean, there's aspects of it that you can hand off. I mean, certainly, like doing a buyer tour, once the properties are decided, like, you could definitely send a less experienced agent to go with a group of clients to just look at the houses themselves, or, having somebody run an open house for you for a seller's listing, like that is a less skilled task. But there's plenty of stuff that the clients want someone who is very experienced to help guide them on. And I think about it too in terms of like, if anybody's ever worked with a law firm, if you've ever had legal work that you need done, there's the head lawyers that charge $400 or $500 an hour, and then they have associate attorneys who, you maybe work with for $150, $200, $250 an hour. There's a lot of work that the associates can get done, but ultimately the big time decisions, you want that run through that top lawyer who's had the experience, who perhaps knows the judges or knows the other attorneys, and can really advise you on, making this decision will give you the best outcome or the greatest chance of a good outcome, because obviously none of us can predict what any of these things are, how they're going to play out once you do them. But that has definitely, I see that as delegation really is the future of our business. Getting administrative people in place to cover some of these tasks that are eating up time and are not resulting in equivalent revenue.
Got it. All right, maybe one or two more questions. I was going to ask you, millennial technology is a big part of our lives. I guess as it relates to how do you incorporate technology, but even like how do you incorporate AI into your business? Is it just like having ChatGPT, let's say, for example, help write listings, or is it more in depth that you're using tools
So
like that?
I wouldn't say that I'm using AI as much as maybe other people are using it. I mean, we use it here and there. Our MLS in Massachusetts is now starting to offer an AI description component where you can basically like load the pictures in for the listing, and then AI will write a sample description for you based on, analyzing those pictures. And I have used AI. I actually used it for some coding work. We were doing some stuff on the website, and I needed some HTML code. And maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I could have written a website from scratch, but I certainly couldn't do it now. And so what I was trying to do, I was just feeding into ChatGPT like, hey, I need HTML code that does this. And it would spit it out, and I'd try it, and it didn't work right. And so I'd have to like tweak the way I was asking it to do it. I mentioned before, my degree is in writing and literature, so I don't like AI to write anything for me. And if AI does write something, I'm gonna edit it anyway. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna look over it like I was grading a paper, because it just doesn't, when you're reading writing that's been written by AI, like we can all, it just has that sort of stale mechanical feel to it. It doesn't feel like a person did that. I can definitely see in the future, I think AI is going to play more of a role in prospecting for clients, like analyzing data and figuring out. It's part of the challenge that every real estate agent deals with is like, you can't market to the entire city of Boston. And even if you could, you wouldn't want to. Like, there's no benefit to that. Really where the challenge is finding your ideal client. And I think that is something that identifying who your ideal client is, I think is challenging for newer real estate agents, because when you ask that question and maybe it's like, oh, a buyer who can spend $700,000 on a home. And it's like, well, if you can't get more specific than that, then you're going to have trouble finding that buyer because your marketing is just going to go in like every direction and you're not going to target on who you're actually trying to get to. And it becomes more specific than that. We work in Cambridge, so we want people who are in the Cambridge market. And over the last few years, I've talked to a lot of people in Cambridge, and I'm getting a much better sense for who owns homes in Cambridge, their ages, their backgrounds, what kind of industries they're in, how they feel about what's happening in the city. And it really helps you to start narrow down on who is that ideal client and how do you reach them and what do you reach them with? What is the message that you want to give them? And that's part of the other challenge with the marketing is that if you don't know who your ideal client is, then you can't tweak your message so that it speaks to them. There is no message that speaks to everybody. There's a reason why everybody doesn't just own an iPhone. Some people don't want iPhones. Some people want Android phones. Not everybody has an Apple computer. Some people have PCs. Not everybody wants an electric car. Some people want gas cars it's people are different and they want different things. And so what I think that AI will be really useful doing as we move forward in this industry is helping to comb through all of that data to recognize patterns that perhaps a person wouldn't be able to recognize of like, okay, who is selling homes in this area? Like, what do they look like? What's their demographic? Or flipping that around and saying, who is buying homes in this area? What are they looking for? What are they willing to pay for? And what are they not willing to pay for? Does a condo with more bathrooms sell faster than a condo with a parking spot and less bathrooms? It's like one of the greatest challenges when you're working as a salesperson and you're trying to sell property is that there's really only one of everything. One of the things that makes real estate such a challenging business is like, if I'm selling iPhones, I can sell 100 million iPhones all over the world, and it's the exact same iPhone, and I can get a tremendous amount of market data of like, where are they selling and how fast are they selling and who are they selling to? And so I can start to tweak my marketing campaigns because I'm just selling so many of the exact same product. But with housing, no two houses are exactly the same. Even if it was like a new subdivision where you built 20 identical houses, they're not all going to sit on identical lots facing the exact same direction, positioned in the exact same way. Like they're all going to be slightly different in some way, shape, or form. And so, that's why it's just a very imperfect science. We run the comps and we look at what else has sold. And when we come up with a listing price, we do it based on the best research that we have, but you really never know how any home is going to play until you put it on the market and the buyers come through and you see, did you get multiple offers over asking? Did you get one offer at asking? Did you get no offers? And, certainly like when appraisers come in and they do their home appraisals, they've got formulas that they operate on. Well, based on, I think a bathroom is worth $20,000 and I think a parking space is worth $30,000. But the market doesn't function that way and buyers don't think that way. If I've got a 4-bed, 2-bath house here and then I've got 4-bed, 1.5-bath house here, it's not a simple question of how much more is the 2-bath house worth than the 1.5-bath house. You'll find that out once the sales actually close. But as the buyers come in, a buyer's not going to tell you, well, the house is priced at $900,000 and it's got 1.5 bath. If you sell it to me for $850, then I think it's worth that with the 1.5. Like because they just don't think that way. They either think I want to buy this house or I don't want to buy this house. And if it's priced at a point where it's at the right price, then they walk in and I want to buy this. And if they don't want to buy it, sometimes they couldn't even tell you why they don't want to buy it or why they think it's overpriced, or maybe they don't even think that way that it's overpriced. It's just, I don't like this home and I'm going to go look at a different home. So that's where I think AI is really going to play a role as we can feed more and more real estate data into it. I think we're going to really better understand buyer behavior. And I think it's going to help us as people do our jobs better in coming up with listing prices and understanding what's happening in the markets.
Well, thanks, Lou. Appreciate that. Thanks for your time today.